Hello everyone, welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to be talking about what parks and what park chains are doing the best job with their reopenings after the coronavirus pandemic. I have actually had the privilege to be able to go to most major parks and a few other parks since the pandemic started. I have managed to go to Kings Island, which would be the Cedar Fair chain. I have been able to go to 3 Six Flags parks. I went to a Seaworld park, and I've also been to Silver Dollar City, which would be Hershend. So they own both Silver Dollar City and Dollywood. And then also I have been to Mount Olympus, which is kind of its own thing. So I will be comparing each of these chains and their policies and the way that they are executing reopening since the pandemic to see which one's doing the best. I will be looking at a few things, including their cleaning and operation speed. So are they cleaning the trains well, and how are they doing it, and how fast are the operations with this? I will also be looking at their drink policy, because with the whole mask is going to be hot outside, they need to have some sort of way to give water since the water fountains are closed and all of that, as well as the mask policy itself. I'll be looking at that and social distancing guidelines within each park. So I'll start by going over each chain and how well they do, and then at the end I will compare them all and rank them from best to worst. So the first chain I want to start out by analyzing is going to be Seaworld. Now, the only Seaworld park that I have been to since parks have begun to reopen is Seaworld San Antonio. So this is going to be largely based on my experience at the park at San Antonio that day and how they were doing. It's meant to represent the whole Seaworld park chain, but keep in mind that it may be different at, say, Orlando or Busch Gardens Tampa or other places in the Seaworld chain that are open. They may be slightly different, but this is my experience at San Antonio based on pandemic policies. So starting out with the operations, the SeaWorld San Antonio operations were not very good. Now, like I said, this could change depending on what SeaWorld park you are at, but the policies as far as social distancing go will stay the same. So the operations were pretty bad at the park. That's kind of more of a park thing. They did clean trains every hour, which I think is probably pretty good, and it's pretty universal throughout the parks that I've been to so far. They tend to clean trains every hour and then send them empty. Now, SeaWorld sends them empty, and I don't know if that is really necessary, because once you clean off the trains, they are clean. The only reason I would send another train empty is because you just cleaned it and you have to clean the other train when you're running 2 trains. That would be the only reason I could see for running the train empty, but they would run both trains empty through a full cycle after cleaning it. Not to mention that SeaWorld San Antonio was also very, very slow at cleaning their rides, particularly on Steel Eel. It was really bad. The operations, for the most part, otherwise, as far as normal operations, weren't terrible as far as doing it normally. And the social distancing on the trains were, they would spread it out, they would cut off some rows in between every couple rows, and it'd basically go one row after another would be cut off. And I think that's a pretty good way to go about it. But overall, SeaWorld San Antonio wasn't amazing on their operations. For the mask policy, SeaWorld does require you to wear a mask while in the park. However, I didn't notice that they were super strict on wearing them while you were in the park. You definitely needed it to get into the park, which is good. But I saw a few people without them in the park, and not many people were saying things other than ride ops in the station. So I think they could be a little bit more strict on that. The temperature measurement, you did have a long line to kind of get through and wait in. It did go pretty fast, and they had 4 different stations where you would get temperature measured by hand by a person. And I did think it went relatively fast, but compared to some of the others that I'll be looking at, it wasn't the best method. But overall, their mask policy was pretty good. As far as the water policy goes, I thought it was a really good water policy. Since they have the water fountains turned off, they were allowing anyone, doesn't matter what kind of pass you have, if it's a single day pass or a membership or whatever, you were allowed to get a large sized water for free, which is very, very good. You did still have to pay for the other drinks, which I think is absolutely reasonable and okay. But the water policy was really good because they allowed you to get a large sized drink of water for free, even if you didn't have like a member cup or anything like that. So overall, SeaWorld wasn't too terrible with handling their operations and mask policy and water, but I think there are some better ones out there. All right, so now it's time to move on to the second park/chain, which will be Kings Island, representing Cedar Fair. Now, I know that Kings Island isn't going to give a whole representation of Cedar Fair because as the time I'm making this video, Cedar Point just opened today, and it looks like an absolute train wreck, to be perfectly honest with you guys. And Dorney Park opened yesterday, and it didn't look bad at all. So Kings Island is going to be mainly just what's happening at that park. However, it can, I guess, give a representation of the Cedar Fair policies in general. So starting off with the operations, they kind of varied for me throughout my visit to Kings Island. So what I will focus on right now is the operations on Banshee and Mystic Timbers. So when I went to Banshee, the operations were pretty terrible. Now, like the normal operations as far as unloading and reloading the trains without having to clean anything was fine. However, they took quite literally 25 minutes to clean the train on Banshee, and they had like 10 people on the crew there to clean it. It was horrible. Now, they do social distance the rows pretty well. They do the thing where they skip every other row, so that was fine. However, they took absolutely way too long to clean Banshee. Now, they cleaned them every hour, which was what I think is probably pretty good. And they didn't send the trains both after cleaning them. They only sent one train around empty just so they could clean the other one. And as soon as they cleaned it, they went ahead and put people on it right afterwards. So I thought that was just fine as well. They just took forever to clean Banshee, and that's what I thought it was going to be like all day as one of my early rides. But later in the day, I went to Mystic Timbers, and their operations were so fast that since they were only running 2 trains, there were times where there was not even a train in the station. The operations were so quick. They cleaned Mystic Timbers really quickly, and since they cleaned it every hour, it wasn't too bad on the operation schedule. So I think Kings Island has pretty mixed operations. It just depends on what day you go and what coaster you're on. But as far as the social distancing and the cleaning policies, I think they were done pretty well. For the mask policy, you also need a mask to get into Kings Island, which I think is also a good idea. And they are pretty strict on it. They were definitely more strict than SeaWorld on it. I did see a few security guards walking around telling people to put their masks up, but in general, there weren't too many people having their masks down and stuff like that. So where it is pretty strict, it wasn't, terrible. As far as the temperature measurement, it was pretty good. You walked up, a camera saw you, you had to stop for a second and then walk on through right after that. It did not take very long at all. It was pretty quick and painless. There was no manual measuring of your temperature, and I thought it went pretty smoothly. As for the water policy, I think the water policy at Kings Island, and I can only assume the other Cedar Fair parks, is actually kind of bad. So other than being a pass holder and having an actual cup, if you go up there for water, they give you a really tiny, what I assume is the normal cup that they give you for free water. It's very small. You fill it up yourself, but it's very, very small, and it doesn't really help you out as far as like the water fountains being off and trying to stay hydrated. It does not help out at all on that. Also, they have some of their stations closed down at Kings Island. I don't know if it's like that in the whole chain, but that also doesn't help either. I saw a lot of emergency vehicles driving around Kings Island when I was there because of people passing out, including workers. So they probably should change the water policy. Like I said, don't know if it's just Kings Island or the whole Cedar Fair chain, but I assume it's probably the whole chain. They probably need to be like the other parks and give a full cup of water. Overall, Kings Island wasn't too terrible as far as their policies, but I think Cedar Fair as a chain kind of needs to reevaluate what they're doing and maybe try to make it a bit more efficient. So next up we have Silver Dollar City, representing Herschend, which owns both Silver Dollar City and Dollywood. Now, if you've been to both parks, you know that they're not exactly the same or similar as far as management, but I do assume that Herschend would run both parks similarly. However, this is much more based on what I experienced at Silver Dollar City in my 2 days there. As far as the cleaning operations go, they were kind of slow. They weren't the slowest that I've experienced, but they weren't super fast or anything. It did kind of bog down the line and make the lines longer. The normal operations, however, as far as strapping people in, normally without cleaning, were absolutely fine, about average compared to other parks. They did clean the trains every hour. However, if you managed to take your mask off on the ride and they noticed, mainly on Powder Keg, they would stop everything and clean the ride and send it again before they let anybody else on it. And I thought that was kind of annoying. I mean, I know people are going to take down their masks on the ride, and even if they see it, I mean, it's going to happen. I don't know if cleaning the whole thing again is necessary if you're already only cleaning it every hour. That's just something I noticed, especially with Powder Keg. It was very strict on that. But a good thing I noticed about as far as the social distancing in the trains is that most parks will cut off and only have certain seats that you can sit in, period. However, at Silver Dollar City, there were blocked off rows, but if you were in a group of, say, 4 rather than just 2, they would let you sit in that row behind that was 2 blocked off seats so your party could sit together. Since you guys don't need a social distance, you travel to the park together or whatever. They would let you do that, which I thought was a very, very nice touch. Other parks don't have that, and that was what stood out to me as far as operations go. Otherwise, they were pretty average. The mask policy at Silver Dollar City, it is also required at Silver Dollar City, and they are very, very strict on this. You have to have it on to get into the park, and there are a lot of security around making sure that you have your mask on, and they tell you to put it back on if it's off, and they enforce that really well. If you don't listen, they kind of get on you and then maybe even kick you out. I don't know, I didn't see anybody get kicked out, but they are very strict as far as wearing the masks, which is probably a good thing. The temperature measurement, however, at Silver Dollar City is probably the worst one that I've experienced so far. It managed to get a very large line leading up to the park entrance, and what they would do is one at a time manually scan your temperature one by one, and it took a lot longer than some other systems that I have seen. It caused there to be quite a bit of a line. It wasn't terrible wait, but this was before you even got into the park, so it was kind of inconvenient to have all that, whereas other parks have better systems. As far as the water and drink policy for Silver Dollar City goes, it was pretty good. They would give you a normal sized cup for your water for free, just like the other parks that I've talked about, other than Kings Island. So they would give you a full-sized water cup for free no matter what. And I thought that is very good since the water fountains are turned off, and every park should do this. I have experienced most parks doing this, but Silver Dollar City did as well, which I thought was really great. Overall, my experience at Silver Dollar City during this pandemic was quite exceptional, honestly. Silver Dollar City is an amazing park, and they're running it pretty well during this whole COVID thing. Even though the temperature readings were kind of slow, the park overall was very good with it. Alright, now it's time to analyze the 3 Six Flags parks I have been to. I have been to Six Flags St. Louis, Fiesta Texas, and Over Texas. So those are the parks I'm going to be using to analyze the methods that Six Flags as a chain uses. They were all pretty similar to each other, so it shouldn't be too difficult to compare the whole chain to this. So the operations were actually pretty good at First Six Flags. As far as all the normal operations, each park was pretty good as far as getting trains through. They do clean every hour, and the method that Six Flags uses to clean the trains actually makes the cleaning pretty quick, and I believe it's thorough. So they have pump sprayers that look like what you would use to like spray Roundup in your backyard, but they spray disinfectant on each of the train seats and restraints, and then another guy comes and wipes down the seats and all of that, and it goes really quickly, and they load people on right after that. So it was very quick, and I really liked how it worked. The social distancing, they also blocked off every couple rows, and they didn't fill in if you had a group or party, but that's kind of typical as far as what I've seen throughout the parks. A lot of them tend to do that. So overall, the operation part of it was actually really good, especially for Six Flags. The mask policy at Six Flags, you are required to wear a mask while in the park, and even to get in as well. However, they weren't super strict on it. So especially on the Monday that we were at Fiesta Texas, there was like no one in the park. It was extremely easy to stay 6 feet away from everyone since the midways had virtually no one on them, and you could take down your mask and no one would really say anything to you. So they were very, very pretty lenient on the masks, even at St. Louis and over Texas. all the ones I went to, they weren't too strict about it. Occasionally, you'd have someone tell you to put it back up if you had it down. I tried to wear it as much as I possibly could when I wasn't like drinking or eating. But I did see a lot of people have them down, and some of them got told to put it back up. But overall, there are a lot of people not wearing masks just because it wasn't enforced super well. Six Flags, though, by far has the best temperature measurement system. Basically, what you do is you just walk straight through a tent. You don't stop walking at all. And there's a thermal camera that reads your temperature to the person running it, and they say go ahead through, and you don't even have to stop walking. And I thought that was by far the best temperature method. So their mask policy and temperature method was pretty good. The water policy at Six Flags is you can get a normal large cup full of water for free whenever you wanted, even without a membership cup or anything like that. You could just get a paper cup and fill it up right there. And that's also really nice. You can see that that's kind of a consistent thing throughout most of the parks other than Cedar Fair. And so that was pretty well done as far as Six Flags goes. Another thing I forgot to mention for all the other parks, most parks did this. They give you a paper cup instead of filling up your existing souvenir or pass holder cup, just because they want to keep things sanitized and clean. They'll fill it up for you and then hand you the cup to pour into your own. I can see how that'd be wasteful for cups. However, in the situation, it's probably more sanitary to do that than to try and fill up a cup that's been filled up, 10 times in the past week and maybe not cleaned. So that was probably a good thing. But Six Flags honestly surprised me with all of their policies and methods, and they actually did a pretty good job overall with their operations, masks, and their water policy. So I would like to throw in one park that is independently owned and not part of a chain, and it is Mount Olympus. I went there back in May, right when it was like one of the first parks to open, and overall, it was not really run very well. I'm not saying this should represent all independent parks. This is basically just about Mount Olympus. I know other parks that aren't part of a chain are doing much better than this. So Mount Olympus had horrible operations. Even without cleaning the trains, they just overall had terrible operations. Literally, some of them took maybe even 10 minutes when they weren't cleaning the trains. They did clean it every hour, just like every other park that I've talked about, but they were just slow overall, and they really didn't social distance on the trains. I didn't really see any rows blocked off. You could kind of ride wherever you want, and so there was not really much social distancing at Mount Olympus. Masks at Mount Olympus were not required. I did see a few people wearing them, but none of the employees were wearing them, and the majority of park guests were not wearing masks either. So the mask policy at Mount Olympus probably isn't good either. Since no one's wearing them, it's probably not a good idea to have that. The one good thing I will say about Mount Olympus as far as pandemic operating, they did have a good water policy. You got free water, still better than Cedar Fair's water policy from what I've experienced. But other than that, Mount Olympus was probably one of the worst that I experienced. It wasn't run very well at all, especially during post-pandemic times. Although I think during normal operating times without the COVID-19 issue, I think Mount Olympus would be ran just fine in general, but as far as taking precautions, they weren't very good at it. So how would I rank these parks as far as operating after the pandemic? Well, first of all, I would put Mount Olympus at number 5, the absolute worst. They really didn't do anything to take any sort of precautions, and overall just seemed like pretty lackluster. At number 4, I'd actually put Seaworld. Their cleaning really hinders their operations. They have a good water policy. However, they have a relatively slow temperature measurement system, and it's kind of hindering how the park operates. At number 3, I would put Cedar Fair, or at least Kings Island, because their water policy is very bad. I think you go to the larger cups for that. Their operations are kind of all over the place. Some of them are fast, some of them are slow, and it kind of just depends on what you get. And the social distancing is pretty rigid. At number 2, I'd actually put Six Flags. Now, I didn't expect them to perform this well before going into all the parks and experiencing what they have. However, their temperature system is great. Their water policy is very good. It doesn't seem to hinder their operations at all as far as the cleaning goes. And other than being not very strict on masks, they have a pretty good operation system after the pandemic has happened. So Six Flags actually does a pretty good job. And number one, I have Silver Dollar City, because other than their temperature scanning being very slow, they do a very good job as far as keeping everything clean, keeping everyone feeling safe, being strict with the masks. I think that's a good policy. Other than running powder keg how they do, I think overall they are the best that I have experienced myself as far as post-pandemic parks. Alright, so this was kind of a longer video for me. I don't usually make videos this long, but I went in depth with the analysis of parks post-pandemic operations, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and hopefully you guys get some information from this and go out and decide what parks you want to go to from this video. Now, like I said, take some of my assumptions with a grain of salt, because I've only been to Kings Island, so I can't really judge the whole Cedar Fair chain. I'm just trying to see what the policies are and etc. with all the other parks. But hopefully you guys can get an idea of what the parks are like from this. I'm going to be going out to more parks and getting my thoughts out there for you guys. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a huge thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.